Hello friends, I have a new lens to show you today. The Tamron 28-200 f2.8 to 5.6 Di3 RXD lens for Sony E-mount. It is an all-in-one full-frame lens that is special in a few ways. I borrowed it from Tamron and I've been using it on my Alpha 7R4 for several weeks now, but really, I knew early in my testing that this lens is one that I would feel comfortable using and one that I would feel comfortable recommending to viewers. I have continued to use it though, so I have lots of photos and videos to share and my thoughts. I mean, other than it's a great lens. If you are looking for an all-in-one lens for your Sony E-mount body, this is the one that I would choose. Let's look at some of my results though, and then I will come back and discuss. Looking good, right? I'll discuss the image quality more in a minute, but first let's lay some groundwork. Now, the idea of an all-in-one lens is that you can take it around with you and do almost any kind of photography with it. A lot of my viewers only have this kind of lens. While they like the quality of a full frame or crop sensor camera, they don't really want to fuss with multiple lenses. Others have an all-in-one lens as a part of their larger lens collection for things like traveling or something that I did with this lens, hiking. You can be on vacation or on a hike or walking around a city with one lens and you can capture a wide variety of shots because the lens goes from wide angle to telephoto. And these lenses are often relatively compact. It's just plain fun and it's an easy way to shoot. There are generally trade-offs with an all-in-one lens. However, I would say that this lens has fewer than other all-in-ones. Let's look at the lens. First, members, in case you missed it, I did a behind the scenes of testing video in Sedona, Arizona. You definitely have already seen some of those photos in this video. Members, I will link to the video in the description. If you are not a member, I will link to where you can find out more about channel membership. Members see behind the scenes videos, get access to my long form courses, and they receive free photography ebook downloads. Okay, let's get an idea of what the 28-200mm range of this lens actually looks like in real life. I stood in one place and I captured this photo at 28mm. Then I zoomed all the way in and captured this photo at 200mm. That's a lot of range. One quick but important note on zooming, I was pleasantly surprised that I can get from 28 to 200 in one turn. I don't have to take my hand off the lens and turn multiple times. That makes it easier to use the lens and easier for me to zoom in or out quickly to get the shot that I want. If you haven't watched many of my reviews, let me fill you in on something. I review gear in terms of real life situations and how I or you would actually use the lens. These are not theories for me. I may be in the studio now, but I'm actually out with the gear every chance I get so that I can give you an idea of what it's actually like to use the lens and bring home a whole slew of photos to edit, or not edit, as the case may be. So you'll hear me come back to that idea of usability throughout this review. This lens, starting at 28mm, is a bit unique. Typically, we would see a full frame all-in-one lens starting at 24mm. I assume that making that 4mm concession helps make the lens more compact while also allowing the wide aperture. But I'll discuss the size and the aperture of the lens more in just a moment. But there were a few situations where I wished for a little more wideness. That being said, in those situations, I don't think that 24mm would have done the job for me. I think those would have been more ultra wide situations where I would want 20mm or even 14mm. So how wide you need your all-in-one lens to go is up to you. I found that 28mm was not a hindrance. This is a variable aperture lens, like most all-in-one lenses, meaning that your widest available aperture will narrow as you zoom. This lens is a bit different from other all-in-ones though. It ranges from f2.8 at 28mm to f5.6 at 200mm. And it's that f2.8 that makes this lens unique. In fact, it's the world's first all-in-one zoom lens to open up to f2.8 on the wide end. But what does that mean? It means that you can work in lower light situations and you can achieve shallower depth of field effects. And how the lens goes from f2.8 to f5.6 as you zoom is important too. Some lenses can narrow quickly as you zoom, and you can end up at the narrowest aperture for a lot of the zoom range. On this lens though, I found the spread of how the aperture narrows as you zoom to be completely acceptable. So the aperture range on this lens, along with how that aperture narrows as you zoom, means that you have better low light performance and you can achieve a shallower depth of field for longer in the zoom range. Another thing I like to look at is lens sharpness throughout the zoom range. In the past, all-in-one lenses had questionable quality, especially as you zoomed in. So I did this series of photos where I zoomed in from 28mm to 200mm with a few stops in between. Now these were not ideal conditions. It was nearing sunset, it was overcast, I had to increase ISO sensitivity, but I'm rarely in ideal conditions. So I think it's important to look at how I or you might actually use the lens. So I did this range of photos where I kept the aperture at f8. Stopping down a bit like that will give you optimal clarity on pretty much any lens. I will show you some wide open examples though in a moment. So for these photos, I did no edits. They were shot in RAW and I simply exported them to JPEG format from Lightroom. I'm not surprised to see the sharpness in the 28mm photo, but I am surprised at the clarity of the 200mm photo. All the way zoomed in is where I would expect to see clarity really decline. Now you can see that there's noise due to the higher ISO sensitivity, but I am very impressed that I can see this wood grain so clearly. All right, let's take a look at a couple of photos that were shot wide open for their particular focal lengths. At 28mm and f2.8, zooming in, this tippy top of this mountain is crisp. And then zooming all the way into 200mm at f5.6, very crisp. I did find myself shooting wide open relatively often during my time with this lens, and I didn't think twice about it. If you are the type to pixel peep, you probably aren't looking at an all-in-one lens to begin with because there is an inherent loss of clarity when you add the glass necessary for all of that range of zooming. But for most people, this lens is going to impress you in terms of clarity. One thing to remember with this lens is that there's no image stabilization. So for those of you shooting a Sony body without in-body image stabilization and you're shooting handheld, you'll need to watch your shutter speeds closely as you utilize that zoom range. Luckily, the lens is relatively compact and lightweight, so you aren't struggling to steady a large telephoto lens. And speaking of the size and weight, the lens is not difficult to carry around because it is relatively small and lightweight. I carried it during some long and hot hikes and I didn't mind at all. Let's discuss the lens itself a little bit more. It is weather sealed, which is absolutely amazing to me. Again, if I am out all day hiking with this lens, or if I'm traveling with this lens, I don't want to have to worry about a little bit of weather, and with this lens, I wouldn't. The design of the lens is similar to the other Tamron lenses in this line. I enjoy the minimal look. You have a focus ring, a zoom ring, and a lock button. But back to the output. Let's look at using this lens for video. There is minimal focus breathing, and the autofocus is nearly silent. That RXD in the title means that it is a fast and quiet stepping motor. Having recently used a couple of louder cameras and lenses, I appreciate that for video and really also for photographing wildlife or anytime I want to be quiet. So the lens will do a lot for us. What does it cost? Here in the US, it is listed at $729. I'll put a link to it in the description so that you can find the pricing and availability in your area, but this is a lot of lens for less than $1,000. Like I said at the beginning, it didn't take me very long to form an opinion of this lens. In fact, members, when you watch the behind the scenes that I mentioned earlier, I was saying how impressed I was right from the beginning, from those first few shots. If Tamron said, "Hey Leigh, just go ahead and hold on to that thing for a little while longer," it would get a lot of use. Unfortunately, I do have to send it back soon. I hope I shared enough of my own thoughts and enough photos and videos for you to draw some of your own conclusions about this lens. I did use a couple of other Tamron lenses in this line a couple of months ago, the 20mm f2.8 and the 28-75mm f2.8. I will link to my gear reviews playlist in the description if you're interested in those reviews, but I was impressed with both. And here I am impressed with this lens too. So thank you to Tamron for loaning this lens to me. And if you all found this video helpful or entertaining, please give it a like and subscribe. I share new videos every week. And thank you for watching.